Okay, so probably the most important person on this list after Spike Lee is Ava DuVernay. So much so, I think that I would personally label her as a modern day Spike Lee. The way that she is so conscious on her socio-political commentary within her films, she's certainly up there, certainly on par with the way that she makes films with Spike Lee. However, where she slightly differs from Spike, at least in the research I have made for this series, is that she counts herself very much as a moving target, by which she is never only caught doing one thing. She's never just writing or just directing. She is also doing things outside of filmmaking actively that are beginning to shape the lives of young minoritized people, young women, and helping them build their careers in the film industry. And that is something I'm going to be exploring in this video. It's a reason why Ava DuVernay is one of my diversity heroes. So let's jump in and find out exactly why.
What I find interesting about that is all the time in the corporate world, when people are asked about diversity, they often go like, oh, we can't find people. Where do we find them? But you seem to have found the people. I mean, how did you go about being able to find the talent that actually worked for your show?
I looked.
It's that simple. Wow.
So welcome to video 2 in this new 10-part series here on Hakuna MaChatter, as I take a look into some of my heroes who are out there making a difference for representation in film and TV. So though Ava is someone I have labelled as a diversity hero, very interestingly enough, she actually hates the word diversity. This is something I found out. She finds that it's kind of emotionless, that it doesn't really say anything, that it is just a word that is used to, well, I guess, essentially tick boxes, which I know a lot of people will definitely agree with her on that. And in part, I do as well. It's why I always try and say that we should be using the word representation, because the word representation represents something very different to what diversity represents. Anywho, the words that Ava DuVernay prefers to use are inclusion and belonging. She prefers that we are inclusive in what we do when making film and TV. We make sure that people have a sense or are belonging, that they belong within that area. And it's kind of interesting, the different words that tend to come out the deeper you get into talking about diversity and representation. Like for me, for example, I don't say BAME people, which is a phrase used here in the UK. I don't say people of colour or minorities. I like to say minoritized. And if you want to find out why, check out this video here. So Ava really burst onto the scene, I suppose, with Selma. She was always working in the industry previous to that. Predominantly, she was working as a publicist, but then she moved into filmmaking, and then Selma, I think, is probably the first thing people really honestly knew her for, at least what propelled her into the main limelight. And interestingly enough, and I'll be talking about this a lot in my next video as well, but she was not the first director on Selma. In fact, she was the third director, and she was the one that stayed. And apparently that the film that was being built before her inclusion was incredibly different to the film that we finally got. So much so that David Oyelowo's Martin Luther King Jr. was not the lead character of the film. It wasn't until the black director came in that the perspective of the film changed, but we'll get into that deeper in the next video. Now, one thing Ava has said, and maybe you'll pick up on this if you have watched any of her films, her TV shows, or her documentaries, is that everything she makes has to say something. It has to be underpinned by socio-political issues. And even though she is out there to make a story, even though she is out there to tell the story of characters, of people, and something that she does incredibly well, there's got to be something else to it. It's got to be saying something, because for her, filmmaking, her art is her way of speaking, of expressing her voice and expressing her ideas and her thoughts and her opinions and how she sees the world. And I've watched now both Selma and her documentary 13th, and I mean, you can see that. You can see how she, even in the documentary, when we're dealing with real life people, how she is able to humanize and make you incredibly care for the struggle that black people are facing. I mean, it's hard not to, watching a documentary such as 13th, and I talk a lot about it in a past video, which you can check out here. But you kind of also really get that sense when you watch Selma as well, and how even minor characters who only pop up for a little bit, you're kind of right there and you're with them. There's this one female character in the film, Viola, who I think she doesn't say any massive lines. She doesn't have an incredibly massive part, but you care about her, and you find out at the end of the film, you know, again, the character is actually based off of a real life person. And you find out at the end of the film, Ava does the great thing of telling you what happened to the people in real life, and you learn that this woman, it's so tragic that 5 hours after they marched to Montgomery, she was returning people back to Selma, and she was murdered on the way back by white supremacists. And you're just kind of like, I spent probably about 2 minutes of screen time with this character, and I feel so deeply bad for her. The power that DuVernay gives in that film is superb.
It's truly, and I know it's a harsh word, but it is a lie when anyone tells me we couldn't find any qualified people. We looked. No, you didn't. You did not look. You didn't look. You didn't even look. Not even hard enough, because it's not even a big search, because all the women are right there actually knocking on your door and trying to get in. You just never answer the door and paid attention.
Now, something that Ava really loves doing as a filmmaker is to make sure that her surroundings are inclusive. She wants as many different voices around her as she can, so much so she's now actively trying to make sure that the people on set, 50% of them are female, that she has female voices in a strong position in all areas of filmmaking on her sets. And I totally get that. I totally understand why you want that, because suddenly you're no longer asking the questions of, what would a woman say to this? You don't need to worry, because they're there helping you make the decisions, helping to build these stories authentically from their lived experience. And that's kind of the important thing, really, is that phrase, lived experience. Ava DuVernay has her experience, and so then she wants to bring people in that have different lived experiences, so that there are more diverse voices giving input into the films she is creating. And what doesn't help, and something she has stated, is that when she is trying to get recommendations, she's only getting recommendations of the same kind of faces. However, saying that, she has been very successful with her series on the Oprah Winfrey Network, Queen's Sugar, in which all of the directors on that show are Black female directors.
You know, having a majority women directing team is, you know, you hardly ever see, let alone all women. And then this just speaks to the disparity of opportunities behind the camera for women in Hollywood. It's a really, really big deal. It's been a big topic of conversation over the past couple of years.
But Ava doesn't stop at just filmmaking. She's also working outside of that to bring people into the industry, to bring women into the industry, to bring minoritized people into the industry. And in 2018, she was working with Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, and they established a new program called Evolve Entertainment Fund. And this program, this project, is aiming to bring women, to bring young girls, young women, to bring young minoritized people, to bring people from low-income households, to give them internships within Hollywood, within the film and TV industry. They're working alongside DreamWorks to do this as well. And then further on from that, Ava also founded a company known as Array Now, and they work to distribute and promote independent films made by female directors and minoritized directors as well. Now, I've checked out a few of Array's films. I watched Burning Cain and Jezebel, both incredible films, very understated. They work very well within their means. They don't try to be anything too big. They just try to tell very succinct stories. Both beautiful films, both worth a watch. And of course, I would never have heard of those films without doing this research. I had to search for that. I had to go out and look for it. And they're on Amazon Prime, they're on Netflix, they're there, they're ready, available to watch, no extra charge. But you have to go searching for it. And that's depressing in itself. So really, in terms of recommendations for you guys to watch for Ava DuVernay, yeah, watch Selma if you haven't already. Watch 13. For mine, I need to watch her docuseries about the 5 black kids in New York who were unjustly convicted of murder. I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but I will be watching that. That is on my to-do list. I'll be watching more Array films. There are probably a good 20 films that Array have distributed, so I will be getting my way through them. So my next video in this series will be a close friend and colleague of Ava DuVernay. It is David Oyelowo, of course, played Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma. He has been a hero of mine for ages, so if you want to check that video, if you want to see what work he has been doing, because back in 2016 he did something quite incredible that has opened my eyes away on looking at certain aspects of the industry that maybe you may not have noticed before. So make sure you subscribe, make sure you turn on your bell so you are notified when that video drops, because I think it's a great video to really learn a bit more, definitely about the UK film and TV industry, and to see why a lot of British actors have gone over to Hollywood and to America. So yes, make sure you are here for that video. Until then, Hakuna MaChatter.